Since the last 2 years, I have set up a company, a business called Experience Palestine, through which I've allowed international delegations as well as Israelis to come to Palestine and meet with Palestinian voices, to hear Palestinian voices. And those Palestinian voices are a little bit different because they are voices that celebrate life. They are voices that look forward. They are voices that see a future in Palestine. And so we want to move from a language of victimhood to a language of empowerment. We do not want to continuously react to what Israel does and what Israel doesn't do, but we want to find the strength within us as Palestinians in order to find a way to move forward and a way forward towards peace. And today we have several voices. We tried to kind of combine a variety of representations. We have Huda Abu Arqoub from Dura, Hebron, and is the director of the Alliance, the regional director of the Alliance for Middle East Peace. We have Abir Al-Nadshe, who is leading her own business and empowering other women to act constructively and to be business leaders in society, in her society in East Jerusalem in specific. And we have Iyad Dajani, who is currently conducting research in Germany on topics dealing with reconciliation. And so I want to start with you, Huda. Since I've known you, really, you have presented a voice, a Palestinian voice, that is different. You've always spoken about a new language with regards to resolving the conflict. So, Huda, we wanna hear more about that. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight, and in the spirit of Ramadan, Ramadan Kareem to everybody. I think the language that the Palestinians have learned through the years is the language of hope. And my message to the people of Israel who are with us tonight is that do not underestimate the power of hope. It makes people go on for a long time, but do not take it also for granted. And one of the things that I always refer to is a story. This is a conflict about narratives and identity. And my grandfather's story was about him and a Jewish and Christian friends driving all the way up to Haifa for a concert by a Lebanese singer, and then in the morning they are in Beirut, and in the afternoon in Damascus buying stuff, and then through Amman back to Hebron in 2 days. And for me, that's the map. If anybody asks about the map, that's the map. And that's the vision, where people can actually freely move from one place to another, where the Middle East is owned by everyone and everyone has the right to live equally in it. I want that vision back to us, to the Palestinians, to the Israelis, to the Jordanians, Egyptians, everybody. And tonight I'm bringing the strong feminist voice in Palestine that keeps going and never giving up hope.
Thank you, Huda. Abir, so tell us about your endeavors, your success story in working with women, in being a woman that leads such important business initiatives.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My personal experience as a woman, it wasn't easy for me to live in East Jerusalem, knowing that I'm not like others living with me. I didn't have the chance to listen to others, which I mean the Israelis. I had the chance later on when I've opened my mind, opened my ears, and looked around me, learned the language that will allow me to integrate into the society. I've learned a lot about the society that I'm living in, and I wanted to help other women to break all these barriers that will allow them to succeed, to participate in building the country, not only putting obstacles and look at them and cry all the time. We are victims of a conflict that is going on since I was born and before. So I've lived it all my life, but although I've lived this conflict, I've decided to get out of the box and think, what's the problem? The problem that we're not integrated enough in the society. We don't have the women voices loud enough and participated, integrated in anything, not in politics enough, not in economy enough, not enough even in education. Lately, we see like women also not participating in the education. They leave early. They get married and they have hopeless life. What I did is I started my own business, trying to get my education to these women, pass it on. I'm teaching women information technology skills, a new way to integrate them into the society. They can work from home, they can work from offices, they can work from anywhere. So they will get enough money. They will get out of poverty. They will have a reason to live for. They will open their eyes. They will know the society. They will know that their voices count when it's elections. They will know a lot around them. They will teach their children. They will get hope, and hope will build a country. They will live for this country. They will not teach their children to die. They will do just as I do. I live for my country, I live for my future. And this is what we want everyone else to think of. Solutions, not obstacles. Thank you.
So I'm going to refer now to Iyad. Iyad has been involved in some research with regards to reconciliation, but specifically he's been exploring some theories that would apply to resolving the conflict. And perhaps this is a time where we turn to a more kind of intellectual representation. Iyad.
Thank you.
Tell us what you're doing.
Okay, I'm actually a doctoral researcher at the Vienna Center for Reconciliation Studies in Germany. And we work on reconciliation in the middle of conflict. One of my who's going to be a new publication is about information technology systems for reconciliation. So I had to come back here and visit for like 5 months. And I looked at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I see there's no reconciliation. I met some leaders of the Israeli leaders who want to talk to leaders, Palestinian leaders, to bring peace. But they're missing the aspect of peace, which is people. Palestinian people, Israeli people need to have one peace. And that's what is more important. But to go to peace, it's not just a word, it's a reconciliation. We have to work for reconciliation, and this is the aspect that we missed. There's no reconciliation within the Palestinian-Israeli people. That's what we should work with. One of the aspects that I thought about is consequentialism ethics. It's the consequentialism state. Is to build an equal consequence of equal ethics between two nations. And those nations that I would like to adapt to, the Palestinian-Israeli nation. What do I mean? We today talk about 5 million Palestinians that have no rights within the Israeli concepts of the Israeli state. Like in the West Bank, Palestinians, they do not have rights. The rule of law in the West Bank and Gaza is demonized, and that is wrong. The IDF is Israeli Defense Force. It's not an occupation force. And this is seen by 5 million Palestinians that it is an occupation force. We have to work on changing that. The settlers, they are settlers seen by Palestinians as settlers. This is also wrong. So we have to work on reconciliation. And the way to do it is, in my perspective, consequentialism ethics is the conduct of a consequence ethics for reconciliation that would pave the way for peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And this is my perspective of my new topic, actually.
Thank you, Iyad. Huda, I'm going to turn again over to you and ask you to speak a little bit more about the new language that you've been speaking about in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What sorts of language is this? I know you talk a lot about inclusivity, the fact, the act of listening to different voices and incorporating them in order to gain them on the side of peace. So if you can elaborate on that.
Of course. We all come from a place of victimhood. And the idea of liberating ourselves and the other of victimhood is a very empowering notion. And Paulo Freire is one of the educational gurus of the world. He always had the idea of that he put most of the responsibility of liberation on the people who perceive themselves as oppressed. And this changed the whole concept of power. And for me, this is where the Palestinians and the Israelis have to invest more in education, education of liberation rather than education of victimization and fear. So the new language is about liberation, is about inclusivity, is about responsibility. If the Palestinians have the capacity and the courage against all the odds to go and speak to the Israelis, I would think that the Israelis have the same responsibility to talk to those of the Israelis who don't believe that there is a possibility for peace. And this is where I feel like each of the communities have responsibility towards. And we should turn back inward and start working within our own society. Inclusivity is important, and it comes from a feminist thinking, and you don't have to be a woman to be a feminist, by the way. You can actually be a man and still be a feminist. And feminism is about inclusion. If an Israeli can speak to an Israeli who is in a settlement or in a periphery, then this would absolutely help in building trust and building the hope towards a place of reconciliation. But if you are within the Israeli society are so fragmented to the extent that you sometimes don't talk to each other, this is not going to help on the long run. So that's why one of the movements that I'm fully supportive of is Women Wage Peace, and shout out. And in the Palestinian society, there is a huge support for them, not because they think that they will actually bring peace, but because they actually speak to the non-spoken to within the Israeli society. I would say the same also about the Palestinians. If we continue thinking that we are different factions and different entities, and we're city people and village people and educated versus not educated, we will continue with the victimhood story. I think it's time for the Palestinians and the Israelis to get out of their comfort zone, and instead being very comfortable victims and blaming and shaming everybody for their status, it's time for themselves to take responsibility for their status and claim liberation and start being very inclusive about their look at the world. And this is what I'm doing, and I hope that many of us will take this away tonight and start a conversation with the most person that you are politically against his political views. And I think their reconciliation would start, and security will be redefined from being a political position to a human needs position. The Palestinians need security, and the Palestinians are also asking whether they have a partner within the Israeli society or not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to reflect a little bit about this concept of not blaming, not shaming, of adopting an attitude of seeing what works, and this is also an invitation for the audience as well to participate in this. Not all the time, as Palestinians, we want to be presented as victims. And I encourage also those who cover Palestinian news from the Haaretz team and various other news agencies to cover what's positive in Palestine. A few months ago, we had a Palestinian music expo. In the last couple of years, 2 Palestinian singers have won the Arab Idol. Other Palestinian entrepreneurs are appearing on the first cover of Forbes as successful entrepreneurial businesses. This voice is important for you, for the Israeli public, to know that there is a partner on the other side. So, with that, I want to turn back to Abir and ask you, Abir, what has been your involvement, if you want to speak about that, in giving a voice to peace, and what has led you to this point of transformation? Because I know for myself that growing up in the first Intifada, it was that tension, that point of clashes. I used to go to a school in East Jerusalem right next to Damascus Gate, where I saw soldiers right in front of me. But I decided otherwise. I decided that this reality needs to be transformed, that there is something else positive. There is a faith in humanity that's possible. So Abir, if you don't mind sharing some of that story with us.
Sure. So in 2004, I was the first lady in my region to get professional certified for computer hardware and software maintenance. That was a turning point in my life. I gained education, I gained a special skill, but it was out of running away from a very bad feeling that I had before I joined university. I've lost a friend in the second Intifada. I saw him being shot and killed in one of the demonstrations, and I was 18 back then. I joined the university and I was wondering, what should I do? And I decided to set 2 goals for my life. One of them is to try to end the conflict between Israel and Palestine, to pass the message that my friend wanted to pass, but he chose the wrong way. Not through violence, but through non-violent actions. The second one was to try to end the conflict and to cure the harm that was caused by this conflict. I've joined and worked for humanitarian aid projects for 10 years. I promised myself until the age of 30, and I joined the One Voice movement to try to end the conflict. I've been working with my own society, but on the other hand, I've been listening and meeting with Israelis, usually outside the country. We don't dare to do this inside the country. So I've been talking to people, I've been listening, I've been hearing the voices of the people. I've learned about the Jewish identity. I've learned about my own identity and what the people want. I worked with grassroots. I believed in grassroots being able to bridge the gaps and create a new leadership in the Palestinian society that will lead us to a good agreement with the Israelis to end this conflict. This is what I have been dedicating my time for. When I've decided to end my work with the humanitarian missions, I've decided to open my own business. I wanted to work also with my community to create the change from inside, to create a new leadership. So the idea of the social venture that I've started was about changing the reality. Only 19% of the women workforce are participating in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem. This is a shaking number. I cannot believe that all these women staying at home, they don't have voices. They don't speak out. They don't participate in economy. They don't participate in the elections. They don't talk out their voices. They feel different because they are not accepted in their Palestinian society, within their Palestinian society. They have not been empowered as Palestinian women. They talk about themselves as Palestinian women. On the other hand, they have been not treated as Israeli citizens in the state of Israel. We hold until today, as Jerusalemites, Palestinians in Jerusalem, Jordanian passport that says that we are Jordanians. I've been once asked in the UK when I've arrived, how is Jordan? I said, I don't know. Believe me, I don't know. They were trying to ask me many times, 3 times. He was asking me like, how is Jordan? You didn't come from Jordan? No, I came from Israel. My plane just arrived from Israel. I live in Jerusalem. And he was asking me again, aren't you Jordanian? I said, yes, only on passport. This is the only thing that I know about Jordan. It's something that we live on daily basis. We don't have an ecosystem that includes us. We don't get the trust of a bank. We don't get the trust of the government to work in the government. We don't get the trust to work anywhere because as women, we have to be responsible of the actions of the men in our family, if they are relatives, if they have ever chosen the violent way. As if we can change their minds or as if we can even talk our voices as women. You know how women cannot still, until today, raise their voices in front of the men. So they are taken responsible for that. They cannot work in the government. They cannot go out of their homes because of some cultural, religious obstacles, and still we blame them for everything. They have barriers like language that I wanted to get over. So we have now the Just Hub that is teaching people the language. So we teach them Hebrew in order to be able to talk, to express themselves, and to participate. We give them a skill that will allow them to integrate in the society, to bring money, to empower them. They will be able to become leaders in the future.
Thank you, Abir. So, Yad, I'd like you to speak a little bit more about the other part of your research, which is related to social media and its influence on reconciliation. If you can speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, actually, we do work. I work actually at developing information systems for reconciliation, and it's part of developing an ecosystem that has in its core the values of moderation, reconciliation, and democracy, and that can be implemented in conflicts. So one of the aspects that we tried to implement it in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and actually what we found is that the Palestinians, they still don't understand the concepts of reconciliation and how to get there. The Israelis, they don't want to deal with it, they want to do peace, but to deal with reconciliation is something else because they think of reconciliation as part of South Africa, which actually what is happening within the Palestinian side, the BDS, anti-normalization. If you find the BDS has over 500,000 people recruited, and they are going to 1 million people recruited for BDS. So in social media, it's very important that we develop a social media for reconciliation, because I think there is aspect of reconciliation and it's fertile in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We have actually a theory in Jena. It's called reconciliation in the middle of conflict, Hutterland perspective. This, we try to study it in different aspects of reconciliation in the world, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Cambodia, and how reconciliation can be possible in the middle of the strife. So I think the Israeli-Palestinian can have reconciliation, and I think it's the path for peace. And to actually try to, and it's like a combat, BDS, combat, anti-normalization. You have a very big fertile for reconciliation, but we need to work there, and to get to there is using social media as a tool for that purpose.
Thank you, Iyad. Huda, I'm going to turn again to you and ask you to deliver a final message, both to the Israeli public and the Palestinian public.
To the Israeli public, it's important for you to know that the Palestinians also feel that they don't have a partner, and in order to do that, we need to see more of you in the streets rather than yelling at your government, asking for a peace agreement to be done. It's every time I see Israelis in the streets calling for the end of the occupation or calling for anything that is against some of the government's latest decisions, I feel so proud being working with Israelis. But I also work with Israelis who also think that the government is a great thing and the government is helping them, and I don't want their voices to be excluded, and I want them to be included in any vision of Israel in the future. So my message to every one of you, and since I work with thousands of Israelis and Palestinians who took life risks to meet, who lost their sons and daughters to this conflict. They meet and they talk about peace, reconciliation. I want the Israeli society to demand to do a lot of work on trauma healing instead of investing in the trauma, to do a lot of work to stop the fear mentality, to do a lot of work to look at the Palestinians from a place of not labeling them as one lump of people. They are all either Fatah or all either Hamas. The Palestinian people have a history of diversity, and the Palestinian people have very strong voices of women, whether we like it or not, but it's not documented. And again, it's our responsibility. The Palestinian people are very well educated, and the most important thing that I want you to know about the Palestinians is that they know you very well. We do the effort to translate Haaretz, Ma'arif, Yudi'ot, Ahranot on daily basis. We have programs that shows the pulse of the Israeli society. How much of that is communicated to you? How much do you know of the Palestinians? Are we all the same? Are we all teaching hate? Are we all have no educational systems, no health systems? Are we all so desperate to go to checkpoints and stab soldiers, knowing that we will not liberate Palestine by that? I just call on you to do a personal effort to know the Palestinians a little bit more in order not to label them. We refuse to be enemies. We refuse to be the enemy of Israel. Israel has to start making friends rather than enemies in the region. And the only guarantee for Israel's security is us. You should know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Huda. Perhaps? I will just conclude by sort of presenting one other hat that I carry. I work at an organization called the Jerusalem Season of Culture, and we're developing one of our events in the summer is called 7 Ways to Dissolve Boundaries. And this journey allows the participants to meet people that are outside of the paradigm, outside of the scheme of what they expect. And through my business, Experience Palestine, I also attempt to do that. And I invite also, and although that is an act of going on a journey, I invite you to do this process also internally, to melt your own borders and to meet people that you are not usually meeting, to cross across to the other side, because there is a physical separation wall between us, and sometimes this wall is not physical, it's very psychological. So I invite you all to cross that border and melt your own walls and your own borders to meet the other, because in the end, this other is you. He's a human being like yourself. Thank you very much.